Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I have the opportunity to work on yet another Mitchell. It seems like it's Mitchell week. This is the Mitchell 301. It's very similar in all regards to the 300 with the exception that everything is mirror image. On this one, this is a right-handed drive versus the more popular left-handed drive 300. And because of that reason, that's why we're doing the video. I've done several videos on the 300, and in this case, well, it's there are folks that do search YouTube, and they do search specifically for their model. They don't realize that there is a difference, or a limited difference, in how to service a 300 versus a 301. And I want to make sure that they get the instructions on how to do it to keep their reel running. Well, I did a quick test on this one. It is very sluggish. My guess is, based on looking at some of the things like the varnishing on some of the metal parts and the like, and it looks like the grease is evaporated, dried up, leaked out, and so on, and that the performance issue here really is that it just needs a good cleaning and service. So we're going to do that in this video, and hopefully if you have one of these, you'll learn how to do it yourself. And well, if you're just curious about the differences between a right-handed crank reel and a left, you'll find that here. So we'll make sure that our bail is working okay, and let's get started. So to get started, you want to remove the handle in the opposite direction of the way it's turning. So in this case, it's turning clockwise, which means that the handle comes off in a counterclockwise manner. I'm also going to remove the spool assembly by pushing down on the core button, hopefully, and pulling up. In this case, that button might be frozen. Push that down and see if I can get a little bit better leverage. There we go. I'll just set that aside for a moment. We'll come back and look at the spool in a moment. Well, while I'm taking off these pieces and parts, including the side plate screws, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. If you do subscribe to my channel, please use that notification button to let you know when I'm posting videos. And well, you can see which ones I'm working on, and see if that's one that interests you in terms of learning about, or maybe even servicing one if you have your own reel. This one has an anti-reverse that's engaged. I want to flip that switch before I go any further. Take it to the off position so that you're in override mode. And when I take my pieces and parts out, I put those into a parts tray. That enables me to make sure that I know where they are when it's time to reinstall. Well, this is a fairly dirty side plate at the moment. I mentioned the grease being kind of accumulated. I'm going to use a rod and reel cleaner and a little kitchen scrubby pad before I go any further, just because, well, the thought hit me. And we'll just do a quick cleanup on that. I use a kitchen scrubby. It's not abrasive. It's not going to rip the paint off, but it is going to help to dislodge some of the old dried greases. All right. With that little bit of cleanup done there, let's go ahead and pull the side plate. And this is very much the internal workings of a Mitchell 300, just mirror image. So you can see we have a plastic anti-reverse dog here. The spring has come undone, which is fine because we'll show you how that spring works. Your main gear, your gear that's going to drive your rotor. This is the gear that's going to drive your oscillation. We can see already what we assumed is that, well, all that old grease is the cause for the poor performance of this reel. So I'm going to just start taking the pieces and parts off. I recommend as you do this that you take pictures along the way. Maybe you failed to do that. Maybe that's why you're watching this video. But take pictures along the way. That'll help you in any reel that you service to make sure that you understand the orientation of it. And well, when those pieces and parts came off from each other, so that you know the sequence to put them back in. All right, well, that one cleaned up pretty nice. We're going to need an awful lot of cotton swabs and the like. I'm going to remove the gear that's going to drive the rotor now. I get this question all the time. I found a small washer in the set. I don't know where it came from. Where did it come from? There's a small washer on the bottom of this post. And if you're not watching out for it. Sometimes it attaches to the bottom of this gear as you remove it, and that's where you find it and say, I have no idea where it came from. That's where it comes from. Alright, I got the old grease off the bottom. I'm going to use a hard brush to get the old grease out of the teeth of this gear, and then I'm going to put that gear into my parts tray. I do recommend that you use the parts tray, or at least have a system of organizing your pieces and parts when you take them off. Normally I would use a Q-tip, but right now I'm just going to use a small flat-bladed screwdriver to pick out as much of that old grease as I can before I go to the Q-tip mode. We'll take this dog off just so it doesn't get in the way, and we'll also be able to show you how to install that when the time comes to reinstall. Also going to remove the main gear at this point. That's an aluminum main gear. And we're going to flush this part of the case with some penetrating oil. That's going to help us to dissolve the old grease and do the rest of the cleanup. Again, there is a washer on that post there. Don't forget it when it's time to reinstall. And that's where it came from if you've got a small little washer laying around that you're wondering about. Alright, that case cleaned up nicely. I wish I could say the same is going to happen with the balance of this reel. This is your slide mechanism here that's going to drive the up and down movement of your axle shaft. That's why it's performing so poorly, is it's all trapped in with this old grease. I'm going to go back to that faithful screwdriver of mine, and we're just going to kind of remove the chunks. Some folks are wondering, why is this thing so loaded with grease? What were they thinking? Well, an old-timer's trick back in the day, before these reels got very waterproofed, was to overload with grease to keep the water out. That's all well and good. The problem is when you stop fishing with the reel. When you stop fishing with the reel, the greases dry out, and, well, they lead to poor performance of the fishing reel, because it's like trying to have these gears move, well, through old dried grease, right? Well, that's getting dangerous now. I'm going to start spreading that grease everywhere if I don't go for a new towel, so let's do that. And I'm going to remove the oscillation gear now. You want to note the orientation on this one. This gear's got 3 studs on the back side of it. That's going to be riding in the tracks of a slider. You want to pay attention. When you go to reinstall, those studs need to be down. I've had people put these gears in upside down. I didn't even think it was possible, but I guess it is. But you'll notice that we have a handful, 3 of these little gear studs. We'll show you how to install that on the slider in a moment. Push your gear down. This is the slider that needs to come out. Pull it up and out. And there is a stud on the back side of this slider. Right there. That stud is going to mesh with the hole in the axle shaft to enable that axle shaft to go up and down. Pull the axle shaft next, now that it's detached. Slide that up. Wipe that off. Place that in your parts tray as well. Alright, we have 2 more screws in here holding on the slide guide, I guess. Not quite sure what I'm going to call that. When you go to remove these, make sure that you have a screwdriver that matches the... Wow. I'm going to go for a hex nut. I'll be right back. At the risk of breaking that screw or the slot in the screw, I changed over. This is a 5mm hex drive. There we go. And use the right tool. There's one more on this side, grease choked. That one came out easier. I should have started there. I'll pull that screw out as well. I'll just set that aside for the reinstall. Both of those go into my parts tray. Now we can remove the slide. And you want to do that because, well, the grease is everywhere, right? Let's continue now. We can move over to the cotton swabs. We've done an awful lot there. Again, I'm just working with the chunks at the moment. And while I'm doing this, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, if you want to leave those questions in the comment section, doesn't have to be a question on the Mitchell reel, leave it there and I will try to answer that for you. All right, we have a reverse. It's funny me looking at this thing saying, gee, that looks opposite. It does, because it is. We want to take a deep socket. This is a 12mm socket, happens to be a Mitchell tool. And you want to remove that by turning this in a counterclockwise manner. So while I'm working on this reel, I notice that somebody has etched their initials into a reel. That was not uncommon either back in the day. These things were prizes, and well, sometimes they got legs and walked away. So a lot of times folks would etch their initials in there, never thinking that they were going to sell the reel or die one day or whatever and have somebody else have the reel. But collectability wise, collectors don't like to see etched. Of course, the fellow that was, or gal, whoever CM is, they weren't thinking collectability at that point. They were thinking fishability, and this one can fish on for a long time to come. Well, we've just removed that. Here's another one of those hidden little washer. There's a washer on the bottom underneath that. So let's just finish the mop up then. A little bit of penetrating oil in the case. Cotton swabs, they're non-injurious. They do hold a lot of stuff. So it's become one of my cleaning tools of choice. And we're just going to use a few of them right now. Don't forget to get the ones up top here. It's kind of easy. You need to change your view. If you were looking down on it, you could miss it. Turn it upside down and all of a sudden it's, oh, I missed a spot. These were fantastic reels. They were the first of the reels that really caught on in America. They made millions of these reels. Garcia was a distributor. Garcia was not a manufacturer. Mitchell was a manufacturer. And Garcia had the rights to distribute the Mitchell reels in the United States. And that's how you wound up with Garcia Mitchell on the cases. And, well, Mitchell's bankruptcy was kind of brought on by Garcia's bankruptcy. When Garcia couldn't distribute them, Mitchell needed an outlet for the reels. And while they didn't have the selling power or the team in place to get it done, and well, they eventually wound up getting sold off to Browning, and then Browning sold it to a third party, and then a third party was acquired by Pure Fishing, and well, Pure Fishing owns the Mitchell brand today. You will find Mitchells. You will find some of the traditional old like 300 and 308 naming. They're nothing like the reels that were, but the brand does continue on today. You also have things like Avocet and other brands that were not around at the time. All right, this is very clean. I've been checking the bail. It works fine. The trip lever works fine. You don't need to remove the bail or the trip lever for normal service if all of those things are working the way they should. If they're not working the way they should, yeah, you want to obviously address the issue, check the bail springs and things like that, but in this case, this one's working fine. All right, we've cleaned off the gear that's going to intersect with the one that drives it below. Got a good amount of grease on that. Get a grease onto the stud, which goes inside that gear. We're going to replace the rotor cup. The number of shims is important. There's usually 3 or 4 shims. The copper ones go underneath this darker colored one. And those shims are there to set the strike plate properly. If you change the rotor on your reel, you may need to adjust those shims. When you go to put the baffle plate back on, there's a point that comes out from the circle. There's an indentation in the stud that we just mounted the rotor to. And what you need to do is align the two. I've lost sight of where it is. There it is. And then press down. This mechanism right here is the bail trip. There's a little hook that goes down, and that catches the tag from that trip lever. And that's how that operates. Okay, we've got that back on. Just looking for my little tool to tighten that down. Give it a spin. Certainly spinning a whole lot easier than it was. All right, that's the outer side then. Let's get the inner side done. First thing we want to do is put that slide ramp in place. Interestingly enough, the only place you need grease is right there, as that's where the axle shaft is going to intercede. And then you want some grease in the channel where the back end of that axle shaft is going to go. We've got two sides to this. One has got a long slot and the other kind of a squared slot. The squared slot goes up top. And then line those holes up with the holes in the case. Go ahead and get one of those little screws. The back end to start with, I'm going to use a screwdriver that holds them to get me started. And I'll finish it with that little tool there that we have. We improvised because we're having some issues grabbing the slots. Let's get those two back in place. And then we'll finish it off with the nut driver. Okay, that takes care of that. And this is probably what everybody came for now, is how do I put all those gears back in place? So let's do that. Light coat of grease onto the axle shaft. We've already greased underneath there, so not too much of a worry there. Flat side goes through, comes on down, exposes the hole in the axle shaft right there. Here's your slide. Find the slide that has the stud on it. Grease the bottom of the slide because, well, it's got a slide. And you can get grease onto the ramp or the track for that as well. That'll make it slide easier. Turn it so that the stud goes down and then it goes into the axle shaft. I like to move the axle shaft all the way down below when I install this next piece, which is this oscillation gear. I get grease on the back side and grease on the teeth. When I go to install those 3 points, I put down, and you have to check this because if you misinstall this, it's not going to have full ride. So put it down where the middle one is pointing down this way, and then turn it to make sure that you have a full cycle of that slide moving. If it's not moving on a full cycle, it's not going to work properly. Okay, we can install our main gear now. This one again is clean. I think all of that grease just wound up puddled on the side of the case. So what we want to do is get grease onto the teeth, which you're going to drive the well, whatever it's going to drive. I'm at a loss of words. How do you like that? That's going to drive the gear up top for the rotor. There's a small gear on the back. This one's going to drive the gear that's the intermediary gear that drives the crosswind. Oh, I guess I got to put that anti-reverse in first. This is a plastic piece. If you have a Mitchell 300, it's riding this way. If you have a 301, it rides this way. This is your spring that connects to a post on the inside of that piece. That goes on to the stud over here on the right side of the case. On your 300, it's on the left side of the case. And then you bend this back, and it sits right in the lip of the side case. Now we're going to take that off again because we want to install the main gear. The main gear goes through the slot. Oh, one place I didn't get grease. Get a little bit onto the shaft of the main gear. Bring that in. When you're doing this reel, this one's okay. Check the teeth on this. A lot of times folks see that the anti-reverse piece is there, but they don't check the teeth, and plastic teeth wear when they continue to bang against those teeth of that main gear. All right, I'm just going to set that to lock because that's okay to do now. Then we have this thing kind of looks like a hat. It's got the two drives to it. One drive is going to drive this oscillation block. The other one is going to accept the power from the main gear. That's the smaller wheel inside. And that gets installed hat side up, if you will, and locks in like that. And this is the one I was struggling for words with, but this is where the main gear is going to drive this piece. Remember, you have a small washer on that post already. I get the grease there, and then this is the part that's going to drive the rotor. Get grease on that as well. We can install that onto your side plate, and that's how your side plate is properly set up. Well, don't need to do much now. Take the side plate and place it onto the reel. Align the holes. When you go to screw these holes or tighten the screws, don't tighten them all the way. You need a little bit of play to align the other two holes before you do that. So tighten them down 3/4 of the way or whatever. Snug them, but don't tighten them up. If you tighten that first one up all the way, chances are that if you've misaligned a hole, you're going to have to go back and loosen it up anyway. We'll just get them started, and then you can come back and do the finish on that. Also, I'll tighten this one down all the way. We'll go back, tighten the other two. So this was the first reel that I actually gave up on. Can you imagine that? All those years ago, I wasn't as smart as well, I'm not even smart today, but I wasn't as aware of some of the things, and I just couldn't get that slide mechanism to work. Years have come and gone. I've actually figured it out on the reel I gave up on. I just took a deep breath and set it aside and came back quite some time later. There wasn't YouTube or anything like that at the time. I did ask a friend, and he asked me what I did with the slide. Okay, let's give that a quick turn. Oh, what a difference. All right, so now we got the spool we want to just take a peek at here. We're going to remove the top. This is your tensioner that comes in. The wings are up, flat bottom, and we have a Teflon drag washer here. I think this is a newer spool for this reel. And you want to make sure it's clean. This one's got a lot of grease on it like the rest of the reel did. And in this case, that grease is going to slide. It won't have as good a grip when you go to tighten the drag down. So just make sure you have nice clean surfaces on this. He says with a dirty paper towel, but the towel got somewhat dirty doing this piece. And sometimes you will find a washer underneath here. Sometimes you won't. You can just reset that. Again, the prongs come up on this one. There is a flat side to the spool, so find the flat side to this piece. Press it down. Tighten this up. And we can get this one back to Kevin to take fishing again. All right, I've had a lot of grease on this protective glove here, so let's take that off so we don't transfer any more as we clean the rest of this case. Spool goes back on. We're going to take a moment while I have that spool off. There's some residual salts or something on there. A little kitchen scrubby pad, a little bit of rod and reel cleaner. Brighten this up. And we can get going. Some of that is scarred, I think. Put the Spool back on, lock it in place, make sure that it's tight. If it's not, make sure that the drag works and then back it off. And this is it. This is your Mitchell 301, how to take it apart and service it. You can hear that there's a different sound all around with this reel. And it's a nice sound for a classic reel. Now sometimes you're going to get a very loud click in these reels, and it's a different anti-reverse dog. The plastic ones don't make as much noise as the metal ones do. So don't think that there's something wrong with your reel because it sounds different. All right, that's the service of the Mitchell 301. I hope you've enjoyed it. To our first responders and essential personnel, our fire, police, rescue, and the like, thank you for everything it is that you do to keep us safe. I do appreciate each and every day that you do your work. To everybody, well, this is a vintage reel. You may not have a vintage reel. You may have the latest edition of the reels. Doesn't matter. They all require service. Keep your reel serviced and they'll keep you fishing for a long time to come. To everybody, thanks for watching. Have a great day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.